Welcome to the Lunenburg County Hikers Zoom presentation about the Nepisguit Migmaq Trail in New Brunswick. Our presenter today is club member Terry Morris.
Here's the presentation, and Nepisguit Migmaq Trail is its full title. So my approach this evening, I'm not doing a day-by-day how we went on the trail. I'm going to go through the information, particularly if some of you are interested in terms of what I found, and both by researching it and going on the trip, and we're discovering what was on the trip. I did not do this by myself. There were three other people with us. Andrew, who's also here on the Zoom meeting. That's the Andrew K, I'm assuming. I don't see a picture, but I figure he's sitting, listening in. I hiked with Shane, who's my son, and a person I hadn't hiked with before was Martine. Was our third, and you'll see her pictures. Well, some of the pictures tonight are accumulation of all four of us. We shared our photos afterwards, so you'll see some different photos, and you'll see these individuals throughout as we go along. So prior to starting, I had certain expectations about this trail. I guess having hiked on some of the AT with Andrew and Shane, and those were quite grueling trails in some respects, the portions I'd done with them. And so with this trail, we ended up coming here because of COVID. We were restricted because we couldn't go down into Maine, and our second choice was to go up into Quebec, and that was closed off because of the Atlantic bubble. So Andrew actually knew of this trail, and so we said, okay, we'll go there and we'll do this one. And so in researching it, I had expectations about what I was going to experience on this trail. And so I was expecting something of a little more leisure, not as mountainous, a little easier pace, and shorter. We were going to go with shorter days. So I thought it was going to be much more relaxing, and I would see quite a bit of the river. And it didn't quite turn out that way. So to give you some history on it, it's an internationally known multi-day single track hiking trail that it links the Appalachian trails, and it goes from Mount Carlton to the Bay of Chaleur. So it finishes in Bathurst, and it highlights the natural history that they have for this river basin. So I stole some of this. It is a new trail. It's about 3 years old in terms of it when it was done, but it's a very old trail because it's what the Migmaq used for thousands of years as a trading route. So there was restoration to the trail that was done in 1985, but it took up until 2015 for it to shape into the modern trail. So the last portion of the trail was completed in 2018. So there was one individual who originally started developing the trail, and he didn't quite have the funding. So there's segments that were done previously, and then a group in about 2015 took up the cause, and a committee was formed, and they're in the process of really finishing the trail. I mean, you can hike from one end to the other, but some of the infrastructure that they're wanting to put in place is not completely there yet. And so the further section where we started has less infrastructure there, and we've got other infrastructure at the lower end towards Bathurst. There's quite a bit of infrastructure. So the sources of the information I found and used for this, Jason Grant, he's the trail master. I ended up talking and having conversations with him, and he's quite a knowledgeable individual. He's able to answer that. In talking to him, if you don't get him, it may be because he's out working on the trail. And if you'll leave him a message, he will get back to you at different times. He told me the number of people using the trail had gone up 400% from the previous year. So it's quite a large number of people are starting to use the trail. There's also a Hike New Brunswick, carries information about the trail. Particularly for registering for campsites. If you're going to do that, it can, and you don't have to. but you can go through that. Tourism New Brunswick also has a bit on their website. And each one of these sites kind of has a little bit of different information for you. They don't always all carry the same bit of trivia. There's always a little extra in either one of these locations. And there is an official site, the Nepisguit Migmaq Trail Association. And if you go to that site, it carries a lot of information pertaining to the trail. And you'll see some of this as we see in some slides. One of it is they have an interactive map. It looks like this. It does lack some detail, like the finer details, but you can start pacing things out and finding locations and different things. From the Heath Steel Bridge, that's about the halfway point. And so there's kind of the upper half towards Mount Carlton, which is very remote. And then as you go from the Heath Steel Bridge down, that's where there's more infrastructure that's in place. And we'll see some of that as we go along. To get there, you have to go along basically Highway 180, and then turn into Mount Carlton Provincial Park from Bathurst. And it's about an hour and a half drive to get into the wilds out there. We only did the 140 kilometers of the 150 of the trail. The last 10 were kind of just a walk, not very exciting kind of section that we avoided to not do. The trail's broken into 20 sections, so if you wanted to do it in day hike sections, it's very acceptable to that. We came across a number of people in the latter day that were doing day sections. And so when you go to the site, each section is broken up and they give details about it, about its difficulty and what's to be found there. They show photos and different things and where you could access it and where you couldn't versus hiking the whole thing. There is a GPS track now. We didn't have that. I just found that out when I was putting this presentation together, and it's sold through Hike New Brunswick for $5. There's a Facebook site they have, and they were quite excited about us hiking on the trail that we ended up having our photos posted in their Facebook site. We ran into people that were on the committee and they took our picture and posted it. They were quite nice about it. But you can get up-to-date information as to what's happening with the trail, what events are going on, that more up-to-date in that sense. The topographical map, that is sold through Hike New Brunswick, and it's a 1 to 300 scale. It's developed for both the canoeist and the hikers. The river has been known for its canoeing for a good number of years. Talking to a friend, he says, "Oh yeah, I've canoed that river. It's got some good white water for it and that." So for people that like to paddle, it's a very interesting river. It's waterproof, tear resistant, fully bilingual. There's information about access points, campsites. One of the exciting things we thought about it was the teepees, and they are very nice. Whitewater classifications and trip planning information guide, and it sells for $19.99, and you get that, and they'll mail it to you. And so that's the back side of it, as you can see. So there's the bottom ones, but you can make out Bathurst. And then they've got some of the highlights of different areas, some of the falls and different things that they've got listed. But there's a lot of detail posted into this. And based on that, I ended up gaining some expectations. They were showing what they label as falls, lots of falls. I think I was going to see all these wonderful waterfalls. All they are, I call rapids. So there was numerous rapids. So the trail. This photo is Mount Carlton, and this is basically the upper, well, I call the upper section. And for some, that's where the kilometer marking 150 is located. Kilometer marking 0 is back in Bathurst, but it starts up in Mount Carlton area. So there are mountains, but we didn't really kind of go over those. So the Migmaq Trail offers quite scenic, diverse trails for enjoyment of its natural beauty. So we got the Appalachian Mountains, and those are in the upper end, and you've got the mighty Nepisguit River. It begins in the pristine lakes at the base of Mount Carlton. The trail largely follows the Nepisguit River on its journey to the Bathurst. And I thought we were going to be pretty well along the river the whole way. Not quite. So here's another scene as we're along the river, and you can just make the trail. Can you see the trail through along the river? For those that have been in the woods, you can probably just kind of make it up. So its length, 150 kilometers, single track hiking trail from Dally Point Nature Reserve in Bathurst. Never did see that place, but anyways, to Mount Carlton. The hiking direction. So you can hike in either directions, and the most popular opinion seems to go from Mount Carlton. So you're going from the highest elevation going down. So the expectation, sure, it should be nice and easy because you're going downhill. And they say, so there's plenty of parking in Mount Carlton. Just the park should be open for you so you can park your car. They do close the provincial parks down. And it can be used all seasons. If you wanted to snowshoe, ski, you could do sections of the trail with that. But so we did from Mount Carlton and going south, get the downhill slope into our advantage. Here's a nice view. I like this one. So in view of the trail, it can be broken into two regions based on the terrain and the infrastructures I've mentioned. So the upper section, Bathurst Lake, which is 150 to the Heath Steel Bridge, is 75 kilometers, and it contains a high number of moderate to hard trails, difficulty ratings, with few to no infrastructures. Talking with Jason the year that we hiked, they had put in 9 bridge crossings this past year. So it was quite an accomplishment. So the lower section, Steelhurst, Heath Steel Bridge to Bathurst is moderate to easy trails with lots of infrastructure, and that's where the teepees, the campgrounds start to develop, and we'll see pictures of these. Some sections of road trails are on roads. There's about 10 kilometers, and it's of old road beds. And I'm trying to think, this is up in the Mount Carlton area. So it was an old logging road, this section right here. We chose not to hike the last 10 because it was mostly road walk. We're going for trail. And when I'm talking road walk, we're talking probably residential down towards Bathurst. Wouldn't have been this type of road. And it was quite interesting. At one section, there is a section of roadway, and it's a runway for airplanes. We were quite surprised coming through the woods, and there's no mention of it. I haven't come across on a map, and I've even looked on Google Earth to try and figure out where this runway is. But we were hiking, and I don't think we were energetic enough to go up to the runway to kind of like look where the actual section of it. But there is a runway warning sign on one part of the trail, kind of like, oh, expect a plane to land here. Here's another river scene, and so the upper end of the river is very placid. We were late in the season, so the water's quite low, and you could wade across the river. So for anybody, some of the campsites that were kind of people talked about were on the other side of the river, because the access points, if you're doing day hikes, the access points might be on the other side of the river. So you'd have to cross over to get onto the trail. So you'd have to plan it that way. But we stayed all the time on the one side, going downstream. So registration, they request that all hikers are required, well, they make it that they're required to register. That way they can keep track of who's out there and should somebody run into problems, because it is a very remote area. And we'll get into the costs later on here. So here are all the access points, and you can see there's a variety of distances between them, and they're alphabetical A to U, and they've all got their own little names. And that you can find this on their website, so you can plan and you can kind of do all that kind of different things. And here are the 4 travelers. So I'm the guy with the hat, and then Shane is my son in the yellow. Andrew, there you are in your lovely gear, and Martine, she was new. I hadn't hiked with Martine this year, so she was a new hiking buddy for me. And she was kind of leery about hiking with 3 gentlemen, but she came to understand about guys farting and doing all those kind of things. She made comments about those and our kind of jokes and different things along the way, but she survived. So the terrain, so here's how my expectations changed. So it is remote. There is no cell phone coverage for a very large portion of the trail. I would say not until you're very close to Bathurst. There is none to be found. It's wild, lots of beaver. I saw one beaver swimming one day, but there was lots of signs, beaver dams, markings of their chewing. And so this is one tree that had been attacked by a beaver. He was going big. It's very physically demanding. So as you can see, we had to hop over trees from blow down, even though they do go out and they clear the trail as best they can, but there was a number of over and under. So depending on your size, whether you could go over something or under something, but it is a physically demanding trail. It's not as leisurely as I expected it to be. Oh yes, this one. Okay, yes, and it's mentally demanding. It's kind of tedious. It goes on, and it challenges. As you can see by my face, how happy I was at that point in time. That was one of our rainier days, but it wasn't bad. We did well with the weather. Oh yes, and here's a friend Andrew. He looks excited too. As you can see, he was cheery at times as well. And potential hazards. And as you can see, this was actually a forest fire. We were hiking in and we had been told, just as we were departing, they said, yeah, there's a forest fire. And they told us it was on the trail. And we thought it wasn't in the exact spot where they had told us it was further down the trail. But this is where the fire was and where they had put it out. So there are all these kind of hazards. And you're going in and saying, oh, it's very interesting. So never quite thought that. What else we got here? Yeah, this is the Nepisguit Dam. We had to go off the trail to go see it. So the terrain of the Migmaq Trail can be challenging, especially on the first 100 kilometers between Mount Carlton and this dam. So there's no water at the low tide there. So yeah, as you can see, there was nothing to see flowing over. So it was kind of a little disappointment. I was hoping, oh, wait, a waterfall, but no. And you're not, I guess at one point you were allowed to cross over on the dam, push a buzzer, and they'd open a gate and you could cross on the bridge. But not this time. None of that is available. And we had to hike in off the trail to get to this location, and there's no access to go down. There's nothing. And it leads into a gorge, and we weren't able to go and see the gorge. The trail veered away from it, so we don't get to see any exciting terrain, what I would call exciting terrain, to make it as I was expecting, but no. Now for elevation, it's not flat. You'll encounter steep, rocky slopes and often it's very slope terrain. As you can see, they've put ropes out to help people climb up the trail. And here's our crew coming down another slope. As you can see, they're sidestepping to get down. You can see how new the trail is. There's very little development. There's no rocks lying flat or anything of that. The roots, you're traveling through moss. The time of year we were going, lots of leaves were down. But you can still make the trail out quite well. Nice location, some flat locations, and we come across cottage homes along the river on the other side of the river. This was kind of a ranger station where we stopped off on the other side of the river. Flat, and it's quite shallow there. You can walk right across. As the trail hugs the river's edge as much as possible, they do make that attempt, but there is some ownership issues, and just I guess I don't know how they really went about developing it. I know some of it is private property. They had to go around and just to deal with the terrain, I think is how they chose some of it. So you can see the slope of the trail here. It's not flat, it's not easy. I can remember coming back to Lunenburg and kind of like, oh yeah, this is what a flat trail feels like, because we were always sloped down towards the river on this side. So a lot of trail was on this angle, so your footing got used to having to walk on an angle all the time. And so you need to navigate through mud, uneven ground. So this is our uneven ground that you're navigating through. This was quite exciting. This is one of the few crossings. I think there was only 2 crossings where we took our footwear off. I wear garden clogs, rubberized things we carry. But this is a beaver dam, and this is where the trail travels right across this beaver dam. And so we're stepping, there was enough water in the beaver dam that it was flowing over the beaver dam. And might be Andrew hiding in the background coming across. I don't know if this is Shane's picture or could be mine. And so there are quite a few beaver dams, and we did cross a number of bogs and a number of beaver dams. So the beavers were quite active. So it was quite interesting. I think I've counted, there are a total of about 67 water crossings following the trail. So it's quite numerous compared to other locations. We were definitely not without water. There was plenty of water to be found. This is one of our first water crossings, and we did take our footwear off, and I put our clogs on, and we waded across. This is a tributary feeding into the river. So all the water crossings that we did were tributaries feeding in. So there's quite a number. And that was one of the few meadows I can recall. But anyways, fast flowing brooks. Oh yeah, here's another one of those obstacles. There's Martine going underneath. The blue flagging tape is a common marker for the trail. And so you're going over unstable boulders. So traveling through the woods with the leaves down, there were a good number of holes so we had poles. It kind of helped out in that sense, but you would find holes. So this isn't a leaf covered area, but we got windfalls and dry, sticks and trees. But in other areas where there was slick rocks, particularly with the rain and leaf cover, it made for the footing quite difficult at times, or you had to be cautious with it. So that's an expectation. So give you some idea of the elevation change. As we said, yes, you're going downhill. And you look at this, and I saw this in advance and going, oh, that's looking quite level. And when I've come back and I'm looking at this presentation and I'm thinking, okay, each one of those little nubs is about 25 meters. And if you look, you're going up and down, up and down, up and down repetitively each day. And so it's not like one big continuous climb. It was just like a continuous up and down, rolling about 25 meters, which is a good climb. And so you can see how quickly they change. They're quite steep in some areas. So as for markings, so the positions along the Migmaq Trail, there are 21 access points, and the access points also have access paths that are used by day hikers and the rescue teams if they're going to pull you out, maintenance crews. And so each access point is identified by its own letter from A to U. So here's an access point sign right here. So that was access point I. And we can go on next. And the distance markers are placed every 5 kilometers. So every 5 kilometers along the trail, there's a distance marker. So Mark hits the button, we'll see what a distance marker looks like. So here we've got an access marking, which would have been U at the start, and then the distant marker was 150. So it's quite nice as you're hiking along, you're going, yay, we're at 150, and then you're going, yay, we're at 145. So there was a countdown. And then they have the clear plastic trail markings are just the turtle. So the turtle is their trail marker, and it's the Migmaq turtle. And I don't know what all the different parts of it represent. I tried to find that, I couldn't find that. And they do have other signs, other established things that are put up at different locations. So this is at the very start of the trail of Mount Carlton. And so you've got a map of the full trail, and it's got all the different information and bits that are put on that. So we've got new signs, and so you can see what it looks like on the trail. And so the clear acrylic backgrounds are reserved for the Migmaq Trail only, because there are other trails that are connected to that. So you can see that, and you can see that there's we were at 130 kilometers. And so access paths are marked by a 10 by 13 turtle sign with a white background. And so that's not our access paths. I made a mistake there. Look at that. That's a distance marker. But anyways, can't be perfect. There's the access sign. And there are other signs that have been put in, like this was Devil's Elbow, which is one of their kind of like highlight points. I thought it was going to be something unique, and it's just, I think it's a set of rapids is what Devil's Elbow was. And then you can't beat this one, this huge turtle. I think that's from the older, when they were in the 1980s, when they were established the sign. And the Big South Nepisguit sign is probably from the older days. But you can see a smaller turtle mark there and an access point. So, but they all weren't like that. There's some that are quite dilapidated. So some locations where we were showing elaborate trail markings. So we got the trailhead, such as this. And some of the locations have Migmaq words or for what it represents, what it's denoting in the area, and kind of goes with it. So blue flagging tape, as you'll see in a lot of the slides, was what was common, we found quite common. If you didn't see a turtle, there was at least blue flagging tape out there that we stuck to, and it was well marked, as you can see on this little tree, and you'll see in other photos. And occasionally, and so there's another section, some places we found blue paint markings on trees, and I think that comes from when it was marked previous and back in the 1985s. As you can see, the blue, it'll be a little arrow comes up. But there's also flagging tape, and depending on what the prospectors used. And so we found these along the trail, and so they may have used blue flagging tape as well as some orange. But we only got lost one day, and not for very long, because we knew we were having to follow along the river. So yeah, that was the only time. So the side trails also use flagging tape, and there's right now they've developed only one side trail, and that's Mount Denny's. And it's a side trail, and it's about it's close to the 104-kilometer mark, and it uses orange flagging tape. We didn't do that trail. We thought about it, but based on, I guess, the condition of the trail and where we wanted to be, plus we knew what the weather report was going to be, we were kind of moving along. So we didn't take the side trail. It would have been probably added a whole day more onto our trip. We were 7 days, 6 nights doing this trip. And then you get some of the old signs that were hidden in trees. So some of the infrastructure, this is a bear box. So they have a drop box for food and supplies. It's bear proof. You could probably crawl up inside if you were looking for some shelter. It's located at access L, which is about 30 meters west from the access point. And we did go to the access. I did drop off food, and my partners were a little reluctant, a little bit. And what's really nice is the trail committee occasionally puts some little trail goodies in there for people that are hiking along, or other hikers do. So there were some treats when we did reach it on the way back, but that's what it looks like. As for privies, we only found 3 locations where we had those. I think at Mount Carlton at the start, at one of the, I'm trying to think, I can't remember. It's where we get into some cliffs. There's a cliff with a look off that you will see, and that's where there was the only other privy. They're expecting you to do cat holes, dig little holes and do your thing, and bury it and do it properly, which I think they're going to have problems if they get the numbers of people that are traveling on this trail to having to go out and kind of do that. But I think part of their infrastructure, eventually they will develop something of that nature. But if you're looking for a toilet, they're far and few between. I didn't take a picture of the toilets. Campsites. Hikers are on their own for their find sites along the trail. They do have campsites, but you can basically set your own. We used 2 tents, and Andrew had his what do you call it? Hammock. And as you can see the picture of his hammock, and I shared a tent with Shane, and Martine had her own tent. But you could come across, we came across the spot. The one picture showing Shane in the yellow shirt is kind of a lean-to, and there's a fire pit there. We didn't stay there. We were going further that day. But and it's not marked on any map. I think it was developed for canoeists. So there's a lot of campsites along the river that were on the other side, were developed for the people that were canoeing down the river. They could make use of that. There are 6 established sites between markers 0 and 70 kilometers, and we'll see those. So yeah, so here's one of our campsites that we set up. What you want to do, don't wait until sunset to search for your campsite. Flat, open, dry spots can be found, but they're not readily available on the trail, particularly in the upper end. So trying to find some place that's totally flat and pristine campground is not always available, and trying to do it in the dark can become very difficult. But this is, we got ourselves set up before sunset on this one, but by the time we got supper, we were We were in the dark using our headlamps for the time. We hiked in October, so it was limiting our daylight hours. Here's a nice picture of the river, as you can see. So this is one of the locations, the campground, our campsite. It's actually, my picture is pointing towards it in the trees, but there was another campsite that was actually recommended, and it's on the other side of the river. So I waited out midway in the river and took this picture. And I could have gone all the way across the river, but there was no real interest. So I waited out and I took pictures both ways on the river. And so you can see, this is the main river, how deep it was. There's a comment here. So there's a number of campsites mentioned, but the big things, the teepees, we were all like, yeah, the teepees. There's 5 sites with teepees. And what you find at each of the teepee sites varied completely. The first teepee site we stayed in, there was firewood. There is a fire grill inside the teepee, so you could build a fire inside your teepee. There's platforms inside the teepee that you could sleep on. That was the first one we stayed in. And then the next teepee we came on, it had the platform, but no firewood, and the grill was there. And so it there was some variance as to what you could find. They can hold about 4 to 6 people. If you put, I think, 2 to a platform, you could probably get about 6 people. I don't particularly have a picture of inside a teepee, but we were able to shelter against some bad weather one night in a teepee, so it was very nice, and it's quite unique. And we'll talk about the fees later. And the bridges, and they have some marvelous bridges. They have built some incredible bridges. This is one of their rope bridges, and this one is not the largest that they've built. They've got one, I think it's about 100 to 200 feet or meters. No, I don't think, maybe close to 200 meters long. You get to see a variety of bridges. So here's one of the other smaller bridges they have. All these prior to this would have been water crossings. Now you can walk across these swinging bridges. They're great. This one's just an old bridge, the South Nepisguit River, and this old, rickety old bridge. ATVers, snowmobilers would make use of this bridge, but there's a gate on it, so they can't access it at this point. So we could cross that type of bridge. That was about, and this one you had to go up a set of stairs to get to. So it's quite high up above. And here's what it looks like looking across that bridge. And so that's what they're quite heavy ropes. And you can see how new they are, the wood that they put into them, still being quite fresh. And then you got some old rickety ones. That was from that Happy area. There are a number of bridges that are built like that. Or you've still got some old logs that cross some stream beds with nothing but to support you. Here's another bridge. You can see the length of it. And they have, that one's quite wood. There is actually one that has got metal I-beams. They've trucked in, how they ever got them in there, that it's a metal I-beam supporting the bridge. So they're quite elaborate. Each section of the trail is, they try and have commercial industries or groups sponsor a section of the trail. So I guess that's how they get their money for the different parts of the trail. There is one look-off on the trail, and this was at that look-off, and it's high above some cliffs. It's a narrows that occurs in the area, and I see the sign about you can fall off. I took other pictures in the area of the cliffs, and for some reason my camera didn't work that day, but we were leaving that morning and we made it to the look-off. And the privy is about 200 meters down the trail going north towards Mount Carlton from the look-off, should you be wanting to find it if anybody ever goes. So you can see some of the vistas that we could get from the elevations as you're hiking along. So we weren't always down along by the river, but at times we were up quite high. And there are cabins. And I'll have to thank Andrew for this. He'd been to Mount Carlton and he'd hiked in the area, and he knew about these cabins. And if you make it to Mount Carlton, go to the old logging cabins at the very end of the lake system where the trail begins. And they're from the 1800s. They've been refurbished. And you can rent these out. I guess there's quite a few. The one with the solar panelings on them, that's the cookhouse. And it's got everything you would want. Fridge, stoves, running water. There's a shower house, and there's lakes quite close by. It's very, so this was us starting out. This is this little cabin Martin's right next to, Marnique's next to is Porcupine, and that's when we finished. We came back and spent time in Mount Carlton at Porcupine. Monique, she disappeared. Marnique disappeared on us. She wasn't with us for that. But anyways, that's where we started, and that's where we kind of finished our trip into this area. So the hiking season, as with the rest of the Maritimes, the fall is the greatest, and we chose to go in the fall so we could take in the leaf foliage, and it was spectacular. We hit it just right. The leaves turned, and it was spectacular for us. Next on the slide is, so there's advantages to hiking in the fall. Yeah. There's fewer bugs. You got the color of the trees. It's cooler temperatures, and the water levels are lower for crossing the brook. And I counted about 46 to 50 crossings. I wouldn't be far off. Yeah. Disadvantages. You get the colder temperatures, and there's another one, shorter daylight hours. We were getting up about 9 o'clock in the morning, and we would finish probably about, maybe thinking about 5 or 6. I can't quite be sure. But we did have some warmer temperatures. I have to say this was one of the warmer hikes that I was on with my hiking buddies, but it wasn't the warmest, but it was much warmer. Drinking water, there's plenty. They recommend that you do filter or use tablets. I did sometimes, but I end up drinking without. And I put this slide in because you can see how clear the water is. If you're used to hiking or being in Keji, where we've got all the colored water, the water is so clear you can see right down to the bottom. You could see 10 feet down in the water with no trouble down there. Probably tells you what. So they say assume all water is contaminated. You never know what's upstream. Say boiled to purified. So that's their recommendation. There are sections of about 4 or 5 where you would be without access to water, but definitely we weren't without. We didn't have to carry 4 liters like I've done on the Appalachian Trail in a day, but here we could find water on a regular basis, and it's very clear, lovely water. It is a remote trail. The trail crosses several roads, but there's no towns, no vitalization point whatsoever the entire length. Mount Carlton, there are no services. The nearest town is 30 kilometers away. So you must arrive with all your essentials, food, gear, whatever, unless you put it in the bear box, then you can carry half, and a tank full of gas. Cell phone coverage for most of the trail is not available. I carried a Garmin InReach with me for the first time. Anyways, so you can see some more of the trail near or lake, river. So hiking time, yeah. To complete the trail, 150 kilometers, hiking times can vary between 6 at 25 kilometers per day to 12 kilometers per day, depending on the weather, trail conditions, and one's ability. And so we did it in 7 days, 6 nights. So we were doing about 20 kilometers. My GPS unit was giving me around 3 kilometers an hour is what we were traveling at. So we averaged about 3 kilometers an hour, giving us around 20. So costs, to go into the provincial park, you have to pay a fee to get into the provincial park. And at present, there's a $15 fee to hike the Migmaq Trail. And they have you do that as a donation through their trail site. But you could end up on the trail and then pop off and nobody would know. But anyways, they asked for a donation, and I think for anybody that's hiking the full distance, the $15 is well worth it based on the infrastructure put in. Reservations. Now, they have a reservation system for all their campsites and the teepees. So, and that you need to go through. And if you're camping at Mount Carlton, you definitely need to have a reservation ahead of time. And so there's fees to get into the park and park your vehicle, and there's a fee to camp at the park, and then there's a fee to hike on the trail. And any of the campsites, they had kind of a fee. And I had a tough time trying to get the fee to be in a teepee. And I finally found out it cost you, if you reserve a teepee, it's $65. But if you're hiking the trail and you come to a teepee and there's nobody in it, and you go in and you use the teepee, they request that you make a donation at the end of the hike. And so that's what we did, is we hiked. We came across the teepee, we made use of the teepee, and then at the end of the hike, we made donations to what I felt was reasonable for the accommodations. To give you an idea, the cabin, the Porcupine Cabin at Mount Carlton, was $50 a night, and it was provided you with all the wood that you could burn, our entrance fee into the park, and showers, and use of the kitchen facilities. And I said, you can't even get that at a regular campground anywhere. It was a spectacular place to stay in that sense, but there are those kind of fees. There is a few other options. Yeah, that's that fire site again. So fires, they had requested that we have a fire permit for hiking on it. And then when I phoned the forestry service, their phone line wasn't working. And so I asked Jason, I phoned him back and I says, look, their number's not in service. He says, what do you do? And he says, just make sure your fires are out and follow the proper protocol for that. But I think in the summer, if they were there, they would be wanting you to have a permit for going in and you were going to build a fire. We used camping stoves. We didn't build any fires, and even on the night we were in the tent. So this is getting towards the lower end of the trail. Anyways, Mark, so the users of the trail, we didn't see anybody for 5 days hiking the whole trail. We were just us alone, and that's on both sides. We could hear all sorts of cars traveling on remote backwood roads and stuff through the nights, and heavy trucks, but we didn't see anybody. So we've got multi-day users. That's who we were, but we are day users. Quite a few fishermen. As you can see, I've pointed out 2 people that were fly fishing, and this was on our day 5. I think it was day 5 that we finally came. They were the first guys that we saw, and they didn't even know we were on the trail. You could hear them talking, the voices carrying across the river. Canoeists, we didn't see any canoeists during that time, or anybody paddling. Trail runners, on the last day, we did come across some trail runners. They were out for a run, and a good number. And this is Papanoa Falls. So this is like on day 5, we arrive at Papanoa Falls, and there's 30 people. It's kind of like, boom, all these people. They were doing some ritual. So it's a Migmaq ritual that was taking place. And what's quite funny is we're on this side of the river, and they all are over on the other side of the river. Yeah, so the Papanoa Falls were quite exciting. I enjoyed those. We took some time. So sightseeing, so anybody sightseeing. So you pop this up. So services, what else? There is a shuttle service. Should you not want to drive from Bathurst up to Mount Carlton, park your car and try and figure out how you're going to get back to your car, there's a shuttle service that runs by people. It's a taxi that runs from Bathurst to the park. But somebody told me they only drop you off at the park and not down at Mount Carlton at the end of the lake system. I'm not sure. You'd have to check into that. And I guess their service is about $200 is what I've heard. And there is a guide service for anybody that's wanting a guide to take them along the trail. And I have no idea what their costs would be involved. So you can see some of the trees that we had. I think we're going to get into some points of interest. And so the wildlife and forest, so you can see that we had the birches, and you can see the fall colors that we encountered. We were right there at the peak time. It was just golden. It was just beautiful, kicking through leaves. And then we can, a variety of forests here. We're getting into softwoods. We get some more trees. So we get stands that look like this that we were passing through. So the woods did vary quite considerably. We did have some meadows, marshy areas that we did pass through. Some unique things. I can't believe I don't think my hiking partners missed this. Their heads must have been down. This little elf hollow in the tree or something. It's even on one of their brochures and that, but it's quite unique passing through the woods. But you can see the boulders that you're having to stumble over, and you got wet leaves and things because we did have some wet weather. And again, the beautiful fall colors, the orange that was popping through as we're hiking along. Shane's just kicking up his heels in the leaves. He's enjoying himself. And again, just how pristine it looks, like you're looking back towards the Adirondack Mountains. And we've got our river and the trees hugging along. So there are some mountains. And the mountain, yeah, the side trail, probably quite interesting. Mount Carlton Provincial Park, excellent place to go hike if you haven't hiked. You can get, yes. Anyways, so there's views. You see some lovely views like this. And this is what they call falls, which I call rapids. And because it was such a low water, you could walk quite a ways out. So I think in high water for canoeists and paddlers, this would be quite challenging. And some of these, this is probably a half a kilometer of rock, as you can see. As far as your eye can see back in the distance, that's all rocks that you'd have to navigate with your canoe or your kayak or raft. So falls, there were, as you got lower down, the falls did start to develop. So there were these falls that we did encounter. They were very nice. Would love to have spent more time at them, but we were kind of pressed for time to make our campsites. Another set, what they call falls, and you're kind of like, that's a fall? It doesn't look like anything. It's just that the water was low. And again, another area of rocks. It must be one of my photos, it's blurry. Again, you can see where the high water mark is and low water on that. So different seasons and that. Figure you probably at that time of year, you probably could hike the whole distance on the river. Again, more of the rapids. This is again up at Papanoa Falls. This is at the top of the falls. And this is looking over the falls, standing on the edge. It's probably about a 20 or 30 foot drop down. So you can see, yeah, so Shane's standing on the one rock. And we got Andrew and Monique, Martin. I get her name right. Anyways, we're at the falls. I took a picture of Shane upwards. We scrambled around the rocks a little bit. So there are some man-made things that you do see along the trail. So this is probably a hunting blind. So you bring, yeah, just hit your button there, Mark. So there are man-made things. This one I found quite weird, strange. This is a fishing weir that is stretched all the way across the lower end of the river. And I think they're catching everything and anything that flows downstream. And this is on the reserve. But anyways, that's there. There's a railway bridge that you don't have to cross it on the trail. We took a side trip and walked out so we could look up river on this railway bridge as we're approaching Bathurst towards the last day of our hike. And this is the Narrows, and it's quite spectacular. I really enjoyed it. If you look up, you can kind of see a small square up in the woods. That's the look off looking back down the Narrows. And there's quite a steep cliff face. The campground is actually at the top of the cliff. My shadow, if you went up kind of diagonal from my shadow, you'd have to go up the hill to get to the cliff. And there was a teepee up there. We stayed in that teepee that night. So there's cliffs. So that's looking back down from the look off. You can probably, where the grassy section is where I took that previous picture. So this was in the morning. So you can see the lovely orange colors that we had that day. And that's another set of falls. So the river, these are some pictures of the river that we had at different times. This kind of a boggy section but we were hiking along. We weren't in the bog, but the bog was over. So it was different to train. This must have been close to one of our campsites because there's the dishes being done. Probably some bird. I can't remember what it was, but we always got a picture of it. You can see what the river was like in the terrain and mountains in the background. Again, we had this slide previously with the nice orange trees, and this one's another nice one. I'm not claiming this one's not mine. You can just, yep. Yes. This is getting close to Papanoa. Yep, it was early morning. These are the good weather days. And as I would say, this is the Happy trails. This was us pretty well. This is at Papanoa Falls. We kind of got this group shot done up with us. The 4 characters. So happy trails. That is the end of my slideshow, so I can kind of deal with any questions that you may have or different things. Yeah.
There's a list of questions in the chat there, Terry, if you
Is
want to have
there?
a.
Oh, I see. Yeah, there's
Yep.
10 of them. Okay, let's see. I
But
got to
you might
bring.
have- Yeah, you might have answered most of them already, but
All right, I'll just come down. Was this in September? Yeah, so it was, we started in September, finished in October.
okay.
What really helped us out is I had this InReach, Garmin InReach. I borrowed it from a friend, first time I'd ever used it. And it's a cell, yeah, so I could communicate to Kathy through text messages because she would feel more comfortable knowing that she could talk to me, as well as she was able to track me on a map as to where we were. She was quite excited all the time. She says, I know where you were. And she actually kind of was able to tell us what the temperature was where we were. And she fed us some information about some event that took place that day with the InReach. But we could get the weather forecast, and we were able to, off the InReach, had an idea when rains were going to start and different things. And so we kind of were able to chose our start time and finishing times, and a bit of our, whether we were going to hit a teepee or not, to avoid the wet weather. We did started one morning earlier because we generally started at 9. We started at 8 because we knew the rain was coming. We walked into the rain, walked into a teepee, and we hung out in the teepee to avoid the rest of the storm. And it rained pretty good that night. Yes, snowmobilers do use sections of the trail. It is quite, I think, the upper end. The trail is well marked. The one place where we went wrong, and we looked back, going back on it, it was marked with blue tape, but we were following blue tape that led us off. And then we said, something's wrong here. And we kind of picked up the blue tape, which took us back to the river. And we mentioned it to the organizers, and they were concerned about that we did get lost at one time. How would you rate the trail in difficulties? It's a little more challenging than, partly because of its newness and the elevation change. It makes it very technical. It's different on the body. I've hiked the sections in Maine where you would end up having to go up a mountainside for about 20 minutes to reach your elevation, and then drop down another 20 and then go back up 20 or 40. There wasn't great elevation changes in that sense. They were short, choppy little elevation changes, and your footing was at an angle, which made it difficult. How many Ks did you generally do each day? We were trying for about 20 so we could finish. Fire pits, only at the campsites. Now, not all their campsites have teepees. There's only 5 that have teepees, and I think there's 7 campsites. And I made a mistake one night. I thought we were going to have a campsite with a teepee, and we got to the location and found out I had made a mistake. It had no teepee, and we ended up proceeding to go and hiked into the woods and camped. Daily food weight. Well, that kind of varies a little bit. We did use dehydrated stuff. Andrew and Shane are big minimalist hikers, and I come from the old age where we carried all sorts of different things. I'm trying to think, maybe 2 kilograms of food. I like Happy Yak is one company that I found. It's a Canadian Quebec company, and they make wonderful dehydrated meals, both vegetarian and for the carnivores in the crowd. No bears. That's one of my disappointments. I was expecting we would be in the wilds, that we would see moose up there and everything. And all I saw was even the number of birds were kind of lacking. I've got more birds in my backyard. We did hang our food. I carried a rope, so it was kind of a ritual. So we hung all our food on one rope.
Terry, it's Andrew. I'll just jump in because we did start the day after moose season as well.
Hunting season. That was one of the things. We did have a rifle shot one day, and that was on the last day. And I was not happy because it wasn't hunting season. And and I yelled or something.
Well, that's all I see. I think that if there's no more questions, we're done. Thank you again to Terry on behalf of the club, and please watch for future presentations. We have other ones planned. Thank you for watching.